I think a lot of people are tired of just seeing just straight up oppression and, that kind of form of, showing us in that light all the time. During Black History Month, folks were talking about that. There were a bunch of memes like, this is what people equate Black History Month to us. And it was a bunch of like movies that were oppressive movies and like, boycott movies and like all kind of stuff. Like, oh yeah, this is how folks see us 1 month, out of the year as far as the things that we've overcome. And that was decades ago, instead of it being more of like the happy things and more modern kind of things. But there are some producers and I can't remember the young lady's name who's on Blackish, the younger sister.
I can't think of her name, but I know she's like the youngest movie producer.
Yep, yeah. She is. Yeah. She's gone on record to say that she will never make any of those type of films, any films that are oppressive to Black folks. And at first I was like, really? Like that's a fair. Whole like market, but she's young and she's a bona fide producer, right. And she can make that statement and hold true to it because she's, I think she's like probably 16, 17 years old.
If that.
And she's already in the business. She's already there.
Right.
And she's got, success backing her. So she says, this is my constitution, then that's what it is.
Yeah. And then plus the reason why do we have so many of those movies? And they're kind of the same.
Well, we're not the head of studios, and
right.
That's what's the market value behind this. And like this formula works. So let's just go with it because we'll get something out of it,
They know it'll work. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what it means to us.
Right.
Because they did the same thing with any other folks that wouldn't slide. Mm-hmm. It's easy to be like one thing with a black face on it that you can relate to, regardless of what it is. Almost kind of like I was saying about the food. Should you be eating it? Probably not. But if there's a morsel of something in there, we'll take it. And mm-hmm. So I think that the stuff that's given to us is not like stuff that's given to them. Mm-hmm. And so us supporting something does not mean the same thing as other people when they support stuff.
Right.
It's one thing between supporting something when you have choice versus when you don't have choice. It's kind of like, well, you ate the rotten apples. Well, I only had rotten apples to eat. Mm-hmm. That's not choice.
Right.
But you eat them, so I'll give you more rotten apples. Mm-hmm. Matter of fact, we got that conversation one of these days too. I've been itching to talk about it as well. As far as the stuff that we get, as far as like media and movies and music and things like that. Like, should we support it just because they have our faces on it? I know it's the mixed thing of like, if you don't support it, they won't make more of it. But then right. What if they're making more of what you don't necessarily want, but it just has mm-hmm. your face on it? Mm-hmm. Do we have to eat the bad apple? And do we sacrifice and be like, hey, we just don't eat? Because
I think it depends on the person. I think I grew up in an era and kind of, I didn't see a lot of us helming, like, Bill Cosby was like a big thing when it mm-hmm. happened, and we all watched it when it first came out and all of that. Yeah. But I would see supporting characters and stuff, growing up and all of that. So then when I raised my kids, it was like, there's always that thing of Black people are on TV, you know what I mean? Right. And we all gather around the TV to watch it from a long time ago. But with my kids, it was like, we limited television for them during the week because it was like, you come home, you do your homework and, have family time and do whatever from there. But we limited television. But when it came down to Black shows, you know what I mean? We'd be like, okay, well, you can watch this show. Because there's, we don't see enough of us on TV. So this is like an exception to, what you can, watch. Obviously it was quality stuff. We didn't just watch kind of crappy stuff. But then, I'm a big fan of Spike Lee.
Me too.
But there's a couple of his movies that I was like, But when he first came out, I was like, if it starts with an S and ends with an L, I'll be right there front and center. You know what I mean? But there was one that was kind of like about like a vampire or something like that, or
what? That's when I got off for the blood of Jesus or something like that. I can do that. Yeah.
I didn't understand that because I I kind of pigeonholed him into like, he's somebody that uplifts us, you know what I mean, and shows us in these great lights, you know what I mean, as far as like Mo Better Blues and you know, even Jungle Fever, like, you know, all of those characters were uplifting folks. And
even if they're not ideal, it's not like, oh, they're just so wrong. It's almost kind of like, well, that's kind of how that might happen because of that situation, which I think is beautiful because we are nuanced.
Right.
And we could go through and feel and do things without necessarily being the bad guy.
And you could relate to those people that weren't, you know, necessarily, you know, if you look at Jungle Fever and you see the main character had this high-powered job and his wife did, but you also saw that his brother was a crackhead, you know, and that was relatable too. Like, you know, some folks have, you know, unfortunately have had to deal with that in the family, and he showed that too, you know. So anything that he wrote or anything, I was like, you know, when, where, how, I need to be there. But I didn't quite get where that turn went, and I don't think he's done anything else like that from there. I don't think it necessarily did as well, because we want to keep him in the container that we want him to be in. Like, oh, you can't necessarily go in a different direction. So I don't know how that fared, because I wasn't interested.
Yeah, I don't think it did as well as some of his other ones, and I also don't think it wasn't really pushed either. But I just remember just the idea of it, and I thought, like, I'm just funny about that kind of stuff, and our people mixed in that kind of stuff. It's just very heavy. Yeah, so I couldn't. Even from the trailer, I was like, you know, and I normally just see Spike Lee movies. Like you said, if Spike Lee did it, I'm going to check it out. But for it just to be stuff like that, I just couldn't get myself to do it. So what was the other movie that you didn't care to see or care for?
I don't think I saw the basketball one. He Got Game. I didn't see it in the theater. I saw it, you know, I think I rented it later on or something like that.
Did you like it though when you saw it?
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, you know, Denzel was in it, wasn't he? Yeah. So yeah. But even with Denzel in it, I was like, I'm not really like into basketball as much. I know it wasn't a basketball movie, but you know, I just wasn't really that interested. And when I saw it, I thought it was good. But I've seen all the other ones. You know, I have a whole collection of Spike Lee movies, and you know, I quiet as it's kept. I met him at a Black Expo in New York, and people say this, like, never meet your celebrity, you know, somebody that you're fond of in that sense, because you're just gonna freak out. And I did. I was like, you know, I waited in line, and my family like pushed me. We just went to this expo, and he just happened to be there. My family's like, oh, Spike Lee's there, you should go meet him. I was like, no, I'm not gonna do it. And they were like, are you losing your mind? Like, right. We all know that you're a fan, so go meet him. And you know, he had a store, Spike's Joint, and I had been there a couple of times, and so he was selling his merchandise at this expo. And I waited in line, and I got up to him and picked up a hat real quick for him to sign. And I was like, you know, I said the dreaded thing that no one should say, I'm your biggest fan. He looked very concerned, like looking for security at that point.
That's funny.
And I was like, today's my birthday. And he was like, oh, so, you know, he said something like, oh, it's Mike Tyson's birthday. And I said, oh, it's Lena Horne's birthday too. And he signed my hat, and that was it. That was my meeting Spike Lee. I always wanted a do-over, like a mulligan for that. Like, I won't ambush you this time.
That was cool. And that's what kind of happens with those kind of situations anyway. That's good. There's nothing wrong with that. That's funny though.
It is funny. I can laugh at it now.
Yeah. I love his movies. I like the light he puts us in.
When's our Spike Lee podcast? Did you already do that?
No, we could do one. Like I said, I like all his movies. I think that he's brilliant. I think it's a shame that he still got to scratch and plead for money to do movies when you got other folks that studios let them do whatever, and they don't tell them what to write about. Don't give them no notes. Just let them do what they want to do. He should be up there, just like Quentin could go up there and do whatever he wants to do, or Clint Eastwood. They give him a budget. He can do whatever he wants to. Spike, no, he more than earned that. He put cultures on the screen. It's like, how many people could take something, a culture, and then do an interpretation of it that is truthful but not offensive? You know what I mean? That's a fine line to do that find the truth of the situation. Society needs him. and needed him, even if they didn't want to admit it, because we wasn't shown in those kind of situations. And if we were shown in certain situations, it wasn't done that way. It wasn't nuanced.
What you're saying is so true, because we feel like he belongs to us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
like
I think he feels like he belonged to us too.
Exactly. He made a statement one time about awards because, you know, he wasn't being nominated, you know, and he was like, I'm not doing it for that. Right. You know, I'm not doing it for, you know, awards. So I always like that about him too. And just the fact that he's considered like a rebel, you know, because he kind of bucks the system in a sense, like I'm gonna say what I want to say. Sometimes he says some things that's like, maybe not that, but you know, the majority of stuff that he's saying, I don't know if you're a Tyler Perry fan, but I know they had kind of a little, well, I'm glad you said that, but I'm just kidding. I am a fan of the man in the sense of like anybody that overcomes adversity, in the sense of like how he came up, basically. You know, he had a goal and he became successful at it. I'm not necessarily a fan of the films. I think, you know, maybe the first one was one thing, but it's a whole thing. And, you know, and that's not to knock people that are, because, you know, everybody has different tastes and stuff, but.
My other podcast, I had a conversation with my buddies and we got into this big argument about Spike Lee and Tyler Perry.
Yeah.
About their success and what Tyler Perry got versus what Spike Lee got and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, like, my point that I made was that they're totally different kind of directors. Yeah. And even though I'm not saying it was easy for Tyler Perry, I will say that the road to his success, he probably had a little wind in his back as opposed to Spike Lee, who had to scratch and pull his way up. And there's a reason why Tyler Perry got a studio and Spike Lee, not saying that he even wants one, but it's probably not in the same kind of place. They're selling two different things. I consider Spike Lee fine dining, and I consider Tyler Perry like, you know, fast food like McDonald's. Now, if you go by success, McDonald's is the best restaurant in the world. If you go by millions served, right? But what's the quality of it? So I didn't think it was a fair thing to think like, you know, like that mattered to who and what he's done. When people throw out like, well, you know, Tyler Perry did it. I'm like, well, he would. He's selling fast food. That sells well. And people are, you know, not going to be offended by it. You know, it's bad for you. It gives you a sugar spike so you feel good, but it's not really good for you. So that's always been easy to sell. Not taking away from what he's done and the stuff that he does behind the scenes to right wrongs or whatever. But I'm just saying that's a whole different thing. Like I said, it'd just be a bigger journey for Spike Lee to ever have anything like that, when he should really be taken care of by Hollywood. Even though he make movies for us, it's kind of like for everybody. Yeah. Where else are you going to get that kind of perspective? He's giving it to you. For both sides, everybody can see it and see something in it and understand. He's an interpreter.
Right.
How many people could do that? You know how many people got the microphone and don't have nothing to add? And he's out there and he got to beg to speak. Right. Where else is the smartest person in the room, or the person who could show and prove is the one that you just don't let on the mic? They always got to fight to go up front. But they're the ones always having the answers or have clarity of the situation. That's true. In a way, it kind of fits, you know, with America, but then also it's a shame. It's a shame. Yeah. You know, the fool should be the one that's always got the mic. Yeah, it's true. It's interesting because I think I've heard or seen like stuff written about Tyler Perry's like writing, you know, just the writing in general, and how he says, "Oh, I do it all myself. I don't get any help from anybody else." And I believe it.
Talk about that. And then like, well, you should get some help from other people to help you develop these plots. But it's a formula and it works. And, you know, when I see the first couple ones that came out, like I saw it and I was like, I don't need to necessarily do that again. And I did it. I went for several reasons. One, to support my people. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'll go see it, but I was like, I don't need to see it again. And then I think there was like one or two more, and then there was more and more and more and more. And I was like, I kind of feel like, does he get tired of dressing up and doing all of that stuff? And I'm sure he's goal oriented, because he had to be, from starting off to writing the plays. And like, I think he was sleeping in his car and he got support from, you know, people helping him and all of those things. That's what I really love about him. Yeah. But I want him to retire that whole thing and just, you know, the fact that you got your studio, to me, is like you made it. You know what I mean? Like, and I've seen him in other little, you know, character acting in other, you know, movies, which is good, you know, to see him in that. But I think he can retire that Medea situation.
Yeah. I think he tried to, and he tried to make some other kind of movies and they didn't do good. So then he did another one for like Netflix. So
yeah.
And that kind of shows you, like, sometimes you are a slave to your success or what people know you to be, and won't let you out of it, regardless if you have more to offer or not. That whole thing is just it's a lot tied up in there. It's a lot. So real quick on Spike Lee, do you have like 2 or 3 movies that you like of Spike Lee's that you were surprised that you thought he went somewhere crazy with something and he pulled it off? Like you probably wouldn't have watched it if it wasn't him making it. I got 3.
Okay.
So one movie for sure, Bamboozled. Even though I like the idea of that kind of a movie, I probably wouldn't have watched it if it wasn't him doing it. That movie to me is very haunting, very truthful, and kind of scary. The truth of Hollywood and just kind of being locked into people's perception, thinking you have power, being tempted with power, and does it change you and how you deal with that kind of thing, because even in our freedom, we're quote unquote free, we're not really free. We're tied in other kind of ways. So even when we try to do our thing, I think a lot of us are compromised, and we just don't know the level of it until we hit that line where, you don't appreciate working here anymore. And that's tied into your job and your livelihood and your kids, and all the other stuff that's tied to you is tied to that, and sometimes we cross that line fighting, and sometimes we fall over on it. So we go over in different ways and different levels. And it was just interesting to kind of see in that movie. But to me, it's hard for me to watch, even though I enjoy it. It's very haunting. Like some of the stuff that went down in there, especially with Savion Glover, that whole thing that happened with him and all that kind of stuff, and how the things that people were insulted and sickened by became the popular thing, wearing a dress, and everybody think it's funny and it's acceptable now. But if something have your face on it presented to you, then it's okay. When you know it's not. Right. It did that beautiful slippery slope wonderfully. Like I sat there and watched that. I was like, oh, what? It just kind of went through the whole journey of it, and it was just like, wow. Right. Wow, that was masterfully done. I don't think anybody else could have did that without it just being offensive. Right. To just show the struggle and some people being aware of it's happening. Because sometimes when stuff happens, you don't see anybody checking nobody or saying anything about it. But it was like concerns and brought up. And then justification, I'm doing this because of blah, blah, blah. Ego or financial problems. It's like everything that make you fall into line was being brought up with nuance, when most times that's not brought up. There was just a bad person who made a bad decision. No, that stuff is nuanced. And I never really seen that done like that, in that way, to show how somebody who was like down end up, being on the wrong side of a situation. And so I thought that was well done. And that's not a movie I would have saw if anybody else would have did it. And even when I watch it now, just because some of the imagery and some of the stuff that happens in it is really rough for me, but I still, if I saw it on, I probably wouldn't turn away from it, just because it would just draw me in, because it's just something about that movie that speaks to me, even though it's not a movie I would just be sitting up and watching on a normal basis. Right. That's one. Another one that I would say that wouldn't be my type of movie, but it kind of grabbed me, I would say She Hates Me. The premise of it alone, it was a whole bunch of stuff going on with that movie. It's about a company making the medicine. It was about a guy finding out his woman was gay. So she's with her woman, and they have friends that are high powered and successful and whatnot, and they want kids and they need a donor. And what started out was supposed to be him trying to figure out if he's going to do this for his ex-woman and her lady, become almost a business, and how it just kind of got out of hand real quickly, and what that really meant, like, if he's just a sperm donor, is that all it is? And is he responsible for that? Is it connected to him? If it was just a donor? This is the first time I ever heard that kind of coming up, and actually showing how, regardless, you're still connected to that child. That child is still yours. That's still you out there. Be it you feeling like, you never seen, or they'll never find you, and you'll never know for sure kind of stuff. I thought the way it was dealt with was very interesting. I thought it was interesting, the scenario and all that. And only Spike would come up with something so crazy. And I don't remember if he wrote it or came up with the story or not, but just the idea of making something like that kind of entertaining, and the relationships and if it's ethical or not. And it was tied in with a whole bunch of other stuff that had a lot going on in that movie. And to me, it was a premise that was kind of like all over the place and hitting some strong stuff, but yet and still I enjoyed it. And it was just kind of like, like that wouldn't be a movie I'll be sitting up there watching on a normal basis with this guy getting tied in with all these couples to have all these kids. And him having actual discussions with his friends about it and how people saw it on the outside, and even got to a point where he even went to court saying this, if he's responsible for these children and if what he was doing was right or wrong. And the irony of it is like, clinics do that, make billions of dollars off it all the time. But if it was a black guy doing it for black people, then he had to go to court about it. And he's going to try to take him down. But how is that any different than what's being done already anyway?
Right.
Don't do as I do as I tell you. Kind of a situation. So I thought that was very interesting, and also a movie that, granted, cinematography is always beautiful. Always.
Yep.
The costume is always beautiful. That soundtrack, I know his dad used to be over some of that stuff, but even the music selections, like I still buy his scores. Like I got the score for She Hates Me. I love that. It's just just the horns, the arrangements, even the selection of songs. Ernest Dickerson, he enhanced Spike Lee's eye just as much as the music, and Ruth Carter with her clothing and costume design and all that. Like, oof. So, and then just think of all the people that came out of there as far as the actors and stuff.
Terrence Blanchard.
So all that stuff.
He's always reached down and bring people up with him that he's done as far as representation.
Yeah. Like I said, all the famous people that came up after, being vetted through him. And it's just like, Spike Lee had him first, giving people their shine. And I just think it's beautiful. And people always kind of go back to him. That's why you have years later, you have Denzel Washington going back. It says a lot about him. I think my last movie that I think I probably wouldn't have checked out if it was directed by somebody else. He didn't write it. I think it's based off of a short novel or a book or something like that. 25th Hour. With Edward Norton. That would be
one of mine.
Edward Norton. I wouldn't have thought to watch that kind of movie is about a guy that got to turn himself in, right? And it's the time before he got to turn himself in. You kind of don't know exactly what went down, but he's not going to snitch or something. He's trying to decide if he's going to make a run for it or not. The night before, he got this chick that he digs, this young chick. Is he going to run for it? Try to get not only his life together before he got to turn himself in, but his mind together. The option of should I stay or should I go for it? Usually those kind of movies I don't really necessarily care for because not like necessarily a lot going on, but the way he nuanced that movie, it's powerful, and it just always has me coming back. It's nothing in particular about it. Like I said, it's like some guy that had nothing to do with me. He don't look like me, but I feel for him. I feel for the situation. I feel for his buddies. I feel for the chick and the guys thinking that she snitch on you and all this other kind of stuff. We get the big picture of what happened, but not the nuances of what happened. We're in the middle of it. We don't know if he's really guilty. We don't know really none of that. It's just this guy on his last free night. And I think a story like that, if it wasn't in the right hands, it could be very boring. The story would be almost like a play. Like you would have to see it in a theater to appreciate it. But to make that a full-length film, Philip Seymour Hoffman was in there. I'm a big fan of his. Anna Paquin was in it. Rosario Dawson was in it. It's just like a whole bunch of folks was in it. And it wasn't like, oh, these are the stars or anything like that. It was just kind of like, felt like the people really were just there of that time. And I never saw them as the star that they were. I just saw them as the characters that they were playing. So to get those kind of performances out of them, I think it took a special director to be able to do that. And also, I think it was like a call out that he don't just have to direct black people. You know, that he is a strong, competent director. Not that he needed to do that, because we already know that he was. But I think that movie was kind of like, oh. And it almost like they didn't want to give it credit like that just because it was really good. But, you know, Spike touched it. So therefore, we can't get too excited about it. But yeah, he made something that was, like I said, it could have been just like whatever, a TV movie or a play, into this powerful, dramatic, suspenseful, and enlightening film.
Yeah, I think that I thought that it was like with ease and not as intense as like the other ones. I think I felt like I was on that trip with him. Like, oh, you know what I mean? Like you were almost parallel to him, like every place that he was going to and visiting, right. You know, you felt like you were saying goodbye, you know, with him, along with him. I thought the direction was great in that. It just felt very easy. The whole thing was. So that's one of my favorite ones. I like Edward Norton.
Me too.
Too.
So is that one of your three, or you had a whole different three?
That was kind of one of them. So I would start with She's Gotta Have It, because I did not know about Spike Lee until this woman that I was working with was like, have you seen this movie that this young guy, this young filmmaker, you know, African-American filmmaker has made? And that's all she said. She didn't really talk about the plot as much. She was talking about him, because there was some history with his film, you know, She's Gotta Have It. So I was like, oh, okay, let me check it out. And I saw it just based on the fact that there was some up and coming African-American filmmaker. I don't know if I would have necessarily gone to see that film if I had saw like a trailer for it or something. I probably saw a poster, and, you know, being with that artist mindset, I was attracted to the poster, like, oh, it looks like it's going to be great. And I saw it and I was like, this is, you know, even during that time, what was so phenomenal about him making it is that there's so many nuances in the sense of what you're saying about how people feel about women. You know what I mean? As far as like the premise of what she was doing and the plot of what she was doing, and how she was so confident in herself, where she's just like, you know, men do this kind of stuff all the time. I'm confident, I know who I am, and I'm not going to change who I am for anybody. And the fact that she had 3 different men that suited, you know, all of her needs was like before its time. Like that's probably going on now with young ladies. Back then, a whole different era of like women coming out of the like, oh, she's fast, or she's a whore, or she's this and that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And him writing that during that time was, you know, ahead of its time. Yeah. The fact that he can make women accountable for, you know, what they wanted to do, how they felt, them being confident. So that was definitely one of the films that I wouldn't have gone to see, period. That was probably my first indie film. Like I was doing all the blockbusters and stuff. So that was a real awakening. And then after that, I was just like, okay, what's next? You know?
Real quick, did you see the remake television show that he did?
I did.
Did you enjoy it?
I loved it. I didn't just enjoy it. I loved it. I loved that series. I was disappointed that there wasn't a second series. I loved it. Okay. I loved it.
I thought certain parts were fine. I think other things kind of got lost. He didn't write them. This woman is doing the writing for him. So I think some of the writing wasn't as nuanced as I would have wanted it to be. And I think that Insecure coming out around that time messed it up. If I wouldn't have saw Insecure, I think I would have taken that show differently. I think that Insecure almost had like almost a more grounded kind of thing. And this wasn't, it was grounded, but it wasn't. You know, Spike Lee, his Brooklyn is a different Brooklyn. It's Brooklyn. It is. It's an aspect of it, but it's almost like a play. But the way I saw Insecure and how those characters interacted made me look at that expecting something more. And I don't know if it's just because I was comparing them to, or if it just wasn't as strong, or I just wanted something different from it. I don't know.
Did you see the entire series?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, we could definitely unpack that. To me, it was like poetry. It was just like poetry to me. And the way that it was written, the dialogue in it was very poetic. Even the actual person that played, you know, the character, she didn't look like she didn't look like the original character. She's a, you know, short brown girl, you know. So for her to be very confident, even in her stature, was good for me. I'm a short brown girl, you know what I mean? So like the fact that it was updated and modernized, you know what I mean, as far as the relationships that she had, it was just good. I mean, I just really liked it. I liked the way that it looked, because that's, you know, that's who Spike Lee is. Yeah. Yeah, I just really liked it. So we can definitely unpack that more. We can go on episode.
For sure. Like I said, it was beautifully shot. I love seeing beautiful brown people. Everybody not just fair skinned, which I thought was kind of cool. I like the fact that she was an artist and all that. I love the music.
Yes.
I even didn't mind Mars Blackman reinterpretation because that makes sense. I wasn't like, oh, he's not black. No, that fits.
Yeah.
He had the vibe. He had the vibe. The different dudes, I like how that was done. Even the posh dude, he was funny. I don't know. Like I said, parts of it to me was just really strong, and other parts of it just kind of like,
There were probably some episodes that were a little weak. You know what I mean? In the sense of like a very strong one, and then this one is just kind of like this one. You know what I mean?
And then with Spike Lee always kind of hitting these points and stuff. The chick in her bottom. That's a Spike Lee thing. You know? Like even that was just kind of like, wait, what? People wouldn't touch that.
Yeah.
They wouldn't. And I wouldn't want somebody else touching it either. Because the way they would do it, like it wasn't like, okay, even though it was kind of played a little bit for comedy, it also touched on the fact that what made that even happen in the first place? That didn't come out of nowhere.
Right.
You got to break somebody to make them build themselves in that image. You know, it was work to get somebody to go there. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't just like, look at their clown like somebody else would have dealt with it. It was like you had the whole journey of it. To the fact that she even had to laugh a little bit about it at the end. What was I thinking?
Right. Yeah. No matter who was telling her not to do it, she was like, I'm trying to make this money. Yeah. Trying to make my image a little, different too.
So I thought that was a full situation versus thinking people just lost their mind trying to hurt themselves. No, I don't think that's ever the case. But in untrained hands, that's normally how it's promoted. So I like that it was nuanced and fair, even though it's still crazy to see. They didn't let it just be a spectacle. They let it be a learning lesson.
Yeah.
So I didn't
one
hate
of my
it,
favorites,
but
I love the retreats, the artist retreat.
That was neat.
I love that part.
Even the artist personalities, how someone was like pretentious and stuff. I thought it was just funny because like, I know some of those types, and all the stories like, And she just wanted to be an artist. I saw myself in that. Like if I was in that situation, I'd be more kind of like her, just knowing that all artists are not created equal and people have different agendas. Because you just think that I'm an artist, they're artists, we are artists. No. Without further information, you don't know if you're we. And so sometimes you give people credit that they don't necessarily earn. And that's a journey within itself. Yeah. So
you liked it. See?
I didn't hate it, but I know the way I said it. I didn't want you to just think that I didn't want it to come off as if I didn't. So I did have issues, but it wasn't to tear it down because I did watch it, but it was just kind of like, some of it was just kind of, but but I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. So that's okay. I just, cause when I said it, you were like, what? Like stunned. That was pretty funny. That was pretty funny. I want to say maybe Crooklyn. Only because it didn't seem like the other movies, you know what I'm saying? It was just completely different. If it was somebody else that was like, oh, I made this story about a family in Brooklyn. Yeah. I might have been like, oh, I'll wait until it comes on TV or rent it or something like that. But I didn't know until after I saw that it was based on, his true story, about his family. His mom passed away and his father was a musician and he was in this movie. So I don't think I would have necessarily went to go see something like that if it wasn't him, if he didn't direct it. And I basically just went because it was a Spike Lee film. Okay. Not based on the actual trailer or anything else that I saw. Yeah. I just, because it was about kids and stuff, and it kind of strayed away from the stuff that I normally saw him do, like very adult things, you know what I mean? And then it was like, okay, do I want to see like a movie about a family, without knowing it was really about, his family. Yeah. And that was just more endearing when I think I figured it out in the movie. Like, oh, this kind of parallels like his situation, his life. And I did enjoy it when I figured that part out. And just the acting was good. So that was one of them. The movie that I saw that I probably was on the fence about because it had been a couple of years since he had made any films. Miracle at Santa Ana was 2008, and then Red Hook Summer was 2012. There's a big gap between. So I was like, where you been, Spike? Let me rush to the theater to go see it. Yeah. And I did not like that movie at all. Red Hook Summer. It gave me a guttural response. I walked out of that theater and I had to walk around the parking lot.
I had a similar reaction.
Yeah. My family was with me and they were like, okay. You know what I mean? Like, you know, what's going on? I was disturbed by that. I was disappointed. I was everything by that movie. I was disappointed in him, I would say. I was, because I was like, I don't understand why he would make a movie like that. Yeah. I felt bamboozled. I did. So you got something to say.
Okay. All right, let's touch on it a little bit then, since we're here. Okay. You saying you didn't like that one, even though you went to it because of Spike Lee?
I did not like that.
Okay.
It ended with me not liking it. I went because it was a Spike Lee movie. Okay. I like Spike Lee movies that are Mo Better Blues, mm-hmm. Jungle Fever, all of those, you know, School Days, all of those that show us in a light that other people don't see us in, that people think is impossible for us to be in. So when it comes down to like the family genres, I'm like, oh, okay, you know, that's something that you can see in any light. Anyone can make a family genre. So I went because it was a Spike Lee movie, but if someone else had made it, I probably would have skipped that, you know.
Okay, same for me. I didn't see it in theater because I don't know if it was in the theater at the time or it was one of those kind of movies like I was looking up something about him and I was like, I don't remember this movie, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so when it finally came out, it's like, oh, it's coming to, I don't know if it was like Netflix or something where I could watch it, right? And I was excited. So I was like, let me check out this movie. Cause I thought, like, how did that slide by? I don't remember no trailers for it, no nothing. I'm like, I don't remember him doing this movie. Mm-hmm. And so I was excited to see it. I was kind of curious. So when I first started seeing it, and I'm like, and it looked kind of cheap. You know, it looked like it was like one of those new cameras because usually Spike Lee has a look, right? You know,
right? Yeah.
You know, it doesn't look like his normal movies or whatnot. Mm-hmm. You know, and then they show like him walking by with the pizza, and I was like, oh, so he's tied it into like he's still around delivering pizzas for Sal.
Exactly.
Sal's got burned. So I was like, okay, that's a good sign. It's kind of rough, but whatever. Dialogue's kind of clunky. I see the kid. Oh, kid is cute, and I like his interaction with the girl. So it was like I was forgiving a lot of stuff because, like Spike Lee, he'd be the one that would let first-time actors have a chance. It's been a while now, but I was kind of used to if the person wasn't the best actor or whatever, you just kind of forgave it because the story and all the rest of it. Mm-hmm. But I was hanging in there because I like Spike Lee and trying to see where he's going with it. And then he went to go live with his grandfather over the summer and all that. That movie was haunting. It hit me hard. It messed me up. Almost where I almost didn't want to touch anything of his just because it was just like, I didn't know what to do with that. Like, why go there? Mm-hmm. We all know it's quite possible, right? It happens. Somebody's reality, maybe more often than we care to admit, possibly. So I was trying to figure out how come I took the plot point so hard when it wasn't as if I could have thought like, well, that would never happen, because sometimes I don't like seeing stuff that, all right, mention another movie only for the purpose of kind of explaining what I'm trying to say. You seen the movie Queen and Slim?
Yes.
Okay. I kind of didn't care for that movie, right?
Really?
Yeah. I thought it was offensive, the scene where they showed that little black boy shoot that cop in the face. Mm-hmm. Folks treat us based off of that scenario, which is not a real scenario.
Right.
So to be a black person and put that into reality, even though it's a movie, but to even put that as if somebody can go back and be like, yeah, I remember hearing that happen, or I seen it happening. Not saying that it was from a movie, but remember, we already have enough stuff that's being pent on us. Do not add things to the world that's not. Trust me, if it was a thing that really happened, there was a common thing that happened, they would be playing on a reel. Mm-hmm. We couldn't avoid seeing it all the time. So to put that out there when that's not even a thing, we know who be doing that kind of stuff, and they don't ever show that. So I thought it was just very interesting that a young black boy with a cop that was actually acting decent, did that to him. When we know we ain't seen that or heard no mess like that. Because if it was, we wouldn't be able to forget about it. Because every time they do something to us, they'd be like, well, remember when that kid did it? As a rebuttal to the stuff that they be doing to us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I think about it now, if that's part of the story, that's just part of the story. You know, that was it. That was that scenario, whatever, right? It could happen, whatever. That was his journey, his summer. Because a lot of times in summertime, you go around other family members, you're around different people. Things could happen on summer vacations. You know, it's always some mess that could go down when you go on summer vacation. So seeing him being in a whole different world, that was fine or whatever. It's not that I thought, I guess we could just say, I guess it don't matter. Well, spoiler warning or whatever. The granddad was a pastor and he was messing around with some kids, messing around with some boys. And when one of those boys from his past came up to him and confronted him, that, even talking about that, gives me chills. And that was Carmen Domingo. That's the first time I seen him. He acted his butt off. It made me uncomfortable. Close-up shot. It was just crazy what that meant for that truth to come out. And I don't know. It was a lot. It was a lot. And I didn't know how to take it.
Yeah.
You know, other than me just feeling sick.
Yeah. That's a great word to describe it. I wonder when you have like a preview of that film, because there had to be previews of it afterwards. Like I didn't hear any reviews. I mean, I didn't read any reviews about it afterwards because I don't typically read reviews about his films anyway, because they're always somebody's opinion that doesn't matter to me. You know what I mean? But I was extremely affected by it. And I kind of thought, like, do I want to see any more of his films? And I think if I look at the list, did The Blood of Jesus come after that? Or it might have. I don't know. It might have
been around the same time, because I know after seeing this, I didn't want to touch nothing else. I don't know. It just threw me off. It could have been around that time. How about this? After seeing that, it made me not touch the Blood of Jesus one. I just knew not to go there. When before, I would have watched it anyway just because it was Spike. But after that movie got me, I was like, no. If I just don't feel quite right, I'm just not going to go.
Right. And I don't remember any promotion about it or any like him having any interviews or anything about that film. You know what I mean?
I didn't know it existed. I didn't know it. Remember, I told you I was looking for something else about him. And I saw that he had a movie. I'm like, that's not a movie. What? And at first I thought like maybe it was a video or some short documentary or something like that. And then I saw, oh, he did a movie. I didn't hear nothing about it. And it's weird, you know? Like I know he's fighting for attention and to get out there because they don't really promote his stuff. So, and I saw all his movies. So I was thinking like, that's weird. How did that get past me? And so for me to actually hear about it, not knowing about it, being excited about it, finally getting a chance to see it, it don't seem like it's, you know, it's a lot of money behind it. It's kind of cheap for Spike and all this other kind of stuff. It's not the best directed, not the best whatever, but I'm on for this, okay? You know, like the kid actors and stuff. And then a story to unfold. I'm like I chased this down.
Yeah.
Maybe if I would have saw a trailer and it hinted at something like that, then I would just been like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
Or had the mind frame to know what I was walking into.
Exactly. Imagine taking your kids to see it. Because that's what I did.
Wow.
Imagine that. I took my kids to see it. You know, like I said, I when I walked out, that was in my head too. Like that might have been their first time ever being exposed to something like that. My daughter was in college, so they were older. It was probably like her first year of college. So they didn't talk about it. Thank goodness, because she was at least, 19 and he was probably like 17 or 16, 17.
Right.
So they didn't talk about it. But my reaction from it was probably confusing to them. And I knew that they only went to see that movie because they knew that I really like Spike Lee, that I'm a big fan. So they really went in support of me. Right. And then I was like, and this is what they came out with, and I think we kind of talked about it, but not really. They might have said that was weird, but who wants to talk about that at that age? Teenagers, who wants to talk about, what they saw? And I always just felt like, why? Like, why did he make that movie? Like, what was the reason for it? Like, what did we gain from that film? What was the knowledge that we gained from that? We know that exists. Right. We only know from whence we came as a Black community that some of that stuff exists where it's hush hush. You know what I mean? And nobody talks about it. And it's within the family. And sometimes it's family that does it. And people just ignore it for generations and stuff like that. So I feel like he was speaking to that a little bit, like our community and how we keep things. But I mean, that happens in, Catholic churches and stuff like that too. So it wasn't necessarily just us, but I just was not expecting that. I just wasn't. And it wasn't anything that we were eased into, like you said. It just was like, this is what it is, and that's it. It wasn't even anything that was in the beginning of the film or the middle of the film. It was the end. So you had to walk away with that information. So,
and like I said, thinking about it now, it's fine, I guess. But like I said, maybe it's just like the fact that I was blindsided. Maybe that was it. Maybe, it was just a lot. It undid all the good faith of the earlier part. It just blew the whole thing up. Like, I feel bad for that kid, but what about me? What about
how I'm gonna sleep tonight? You know what I mean?
Right.
How am I gonna sleep with that kind of information? So that was not, that was not good. If I see him again, we have to have a discussion about it. It won't be me saying I'm a big fan and be like, what's up with Red Hook Summer? What was that about?
Okay, so say you did know that it had something to do with, the grandfather, something going down, something messed up or whatever. You think he was wrong for making it?
I don't think he was wrong for making something that exists and it happens and we know that those things happen. I think it's kind of like what you said. Like, if I knew ahead of time, I wouldn't have gone to see it. I would have just skipped that one, and I don't know what his reasoning behind it. He's a filmmaker and he can make any kind of film he wants to make. You know what I mean?
Right.
When I was studying film, I came out of it like, oh, I wouldn't mind making documentary. You know what I mean? So I think that when people make films, they make them, especially if it's somebody like him who's writing his own, films, writing the scripts and stuff like that, they make them for a reason. So I felt like, what was the reason? I want to know, what the reason was. Did he read a bunch of stuff? Like, if you say 4 little girls, we know what the reason was for that, because there was an injustice done, and he's a very, civic-minded person as far as justice and stuff like that.
Right.
So that brings me back to like, why? I know why you made Malcolm X, because you were a big fan of Malcolm X. I know why you made Mo Better Blues, because you have a background with your dad being a jazz musician. Right. I know why you made School Days, because you went to a HBCU. I know why you made, the Santa Ana one, because it's about Black soldiers. You know what I mean? It's like, I know, but then it's like with this one, I know why you did Crooklyn, because it's your family. But with this one, it just left me not saying why did he make it as much as like, why did he go against his grain of filmmaking? What made him decide to touch that subject? If I had seen an interview ahead of time that said, oh, I've been, reading a lot about this kind of stuff, or afterwards, I've been reading a lot about this stuff, or I needed to speak to it, then I would have probably understood it a little more. But he doesn't owe me anything,
We are the other side of his art. We're the ones that view it, and he's the one that makes it. So we can have an opinion on it, and that's fine. I think I'm uncomfortable with how personal that could possibly be. Because to me, it's definitely more personal than She Hates Me, or Inside Man, or 25th Hour. Like I said, it's a Black experience. Like I said, who don't know, going away for the summer, to family that you normally don't see on a normal basis. So I felt like it was in his wheelhouse as far as Black stories or whatnot. But being away from the movie now, like I said, that could be a story that just needed to be told. But I think it was more or less me being blindsided than it was the actual story. I didn't appreciate the story. Me personally didn't.
Yeah.
Like I said, who knows? Maybe, I'm not saying it was him, but maybe somebody he knew.
I definitely believe that there was some kind of experience with that. Like you said, it could have been somebody that he knew, or a story that was told to him or something like that. And he thought, well, this happened, so I'm going to talk about it.
Even though he didn't, but it kind of like he broke a rule.
Yeah, it's like a rule of trust, kind of. I don't know. And again, he can make any kind of film he wants to make, and I'm just the audience, and I don't believe in, filmmakers making films for the audience per se. My kids were older. They were young, almost young adults. You know what I mean? But if you're trying to anoint your kids to Spike Lee movies and you see it's about a little boy.
Right.
It's about a little boy and his grandfather. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
It's a family film, kind of.
That's funny. In general, I don't trust Spike Lee with my kids. In general, no. So
when she turns 18, you're like, okay, here, come into the the room. Look at the shelf.
Yeah, but maybe 16, 17. I don't know. She's about to be 15, so maybe. Well, she is 15 now. Like I said, for the most part, usually he touches, like we were saying, he touches on stuff that usually people don't touch on. So there's a lot of real truths about it. And it's just kind of like, I think that the kids today, when they don't even understand the idea of racism, right? Yeah. Like the way it truly is. Like you tell them and they kind of like roll their eyes or be like, that's not me. Spike Lee or gut punches that they ain't prepared for. It almost have to be something that have to happen first, and you'd be like, "Here, this is how Spike Lee says it." Right. Let me help you break down that gut punch.
I've been waiting for this,
but I don't want to give her the gut punch. I want to help her. I want to warn her, so I'll say my stuff, and then if the gut punch happens anyway, then I'll be like, "Here's Uncle Spike, and let him break down this colorism thing, or break down this, racism thing, or break down this, let him do this kind of stuff."
I took my kids from Roots to like Malcolm X. I believe it was like during the summer, when the kids are out of school or something like that. And they were of age to understand it. And we talked about it. It was like a history lesson in that sense. But like you said, you got to be ready for it. And you're the only one that knows when you want to expose your kids to certain things in life,
Yeah, well, how much control we really have? Because life is going to happen regardless of us opening the door for it or not. So some stuff we could kind of give them a warning to, and some stuff we just got to catch them after they fall from it, and we just don't know what side of it we're going to be on. So I do my preventative the way I can, that I feel, but then like I said, sometimes it's the opposite way around where the situation happens and I gotta break it down or whatnot. But I'm glad for the success he has, but I also understand the road he chose for himself. That's why he isn't a Tyler Perry. Not that he would want to be. He chooses meals, not fast food. And if you don't have an enlightened palate, he's not digestible. He will turn you off. You'll see it on your plate and be like, no, thank you. I'm full. Or I'll just have salad. I'm thankful to him for being that, because we don't find that in too many things, especially with our faces and our experiences in there, where he figured out a way. Every movie could have been Do the Right Thing. It worked. Why not? Do the Right Thing 5, Pookie's Revenge or whatever. It could be anything. He could have leaned into anything, but he always chose to jump and do different aspects and different perspectives in different ways. He could have just been the guy who did college movies. Yeah,
but are we guilty of comparing, folks to folks, like comparing, not apples to oranges in this sense, but that's what the outcome would be. But just comparing, Tyler Perry to Spike Lee, who we know are two different directors and two different journeys and all of that. Do we do that with other ethnicities? Do we compare, I don't know, Martin Scorsese to like
Steven Spielberg?
Right.
I personally don't compare them. I don't compare Tyler Perry to Spike Lee. That's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But like I said before, when you have 50 and 5 are questionable, you could ignore them. It doesn't matter. But you have 2 choices out of 2 choices. You can't help but lump them together, even though they're drastically different. I think sheer numbers makes it possible to separate out. So if you had a store with 100 garments and you had half that was, dresses and half were pants, you could have okay, this is a man's shop and this is a woman's shop. But say you only have 2 outfits, right? Then it'll just be a combined store. Because it would make no sense to separate them, because you don't have enough to have their own category. It'll just be a clothing store versus genre of types of clothes, because you have so many. So we don't have that luxury. We have a store.
Right.
They have boutiques of different styles of whatever. We don't. So that's how our horror movie and documentaries and sci-fi, all that, it's just a black movie.
I'll just ask you this. What's your favorite Spike Lee? Do you have a favorite one?
Yeah, so many. I think different ones kind of touched me at different times for different reasons.
But you can only pick one.
I think that would be hard for me, to be honest.
If you listed them, okay, if you had 3, what would be the order? Mine would be Mo Better Blues. because I like jazz.
And see, some of my stuff that I really like of his is also kind of disturbing in a way, but it's why it gleamed on me. But they be kind of like too heavy. Like as much as I like Mo Better Blues, like I just kind of think of him just being hurt and messed up and just that whole thing. And you know what I mean? It just be crazy. He have heavy stuff. Like I like Do the Right Thing, but Radio Raheem, you know, or even He Got Game. And it wasn't like he was just an abusive man. It just, they got to shove it. Right. And she slipped and got hurt. So his movies are always kind of like, I'm going to love it, but I've got to go in here. It's going to be some thorns in here. And I'm not saying it as a bad thing, but that's how I see his stuff. So as much as I love his movies, it's hard for me just to kind of just jump into a Spike Lee movie, even though I buy them just to support and stuff. And if they're on, I'll watch them. But there's always something I got to go through. But it costs me to go on that ride. And I have to be in a good spot. And I might not be saying that right, but that's how I kind of feel.
Well, with me, Mo Better Blues spoke to all of that, you know, the jazz theme and all of that kind of stuff. And just the fact that it was, again, the costuming, the colors and all of that great stuff in it. I can put that soundtrack on and listen to it all day. You know, my kids even grew up listening to that, you know. And that's the one that speaks to me because, like I said, I have that history of like, you know, watching Lady Sings the Blues. So I've always been like, you know, kin to like jazz. So for me, that's the number one. And then Do the Right Thing because it was just powerful. You know, that would be number one, but it's just so powerful. And then I would say Malcolm X, but I think of Malcolm X kind of separate from him. I think it's just an epic film, and it could be in all the categories of epic films. It doesn't have to be a Spike Lee movie. Like, you don't necessarily need to know that he directed it in order for it to have its credit, you know, that it has. So there's probably a third one, but those are my top two. Those two I could watch. And then 25th Hour is in there too. So yeah,
so I would probably do 25th Hour, Do the Right Thing. I don't know. They're all so different to me, to be honest. Because like I said, I remember when I just kept watching She Hates Me over and over again. I just got kind of stuck on that. I got stuck on 25th Hour. Like I got stuck on Inside Man.
I would actually throw in Jungle Fever too. I would throw in Jungle Fever because it was fast paced. I think it's just something that could happen. You know, I think that's one of the things I do like about him is they're like real life scenarios that could, you know, that's relatable. You know what I mean? And if people have never had those experiences, they get to see those experiences, obviously from his perspective. I think the soundtrack was good. There was, you know, a part in there about family being on drugs. So I'd say that would be my top three: the Mo Better Blues, Do the Right Thing, and then Jungle Fever would be my top three.
Yeah, I'm trying to think because I really enjoy Mo Better Blues as well. Like I said, it's just it's hard, especially like if I was doing recommendations too. It'd be hard. I like his documentaries, like When the Levee Broke. Even though that was hard to watch, that was very powerful and important. And his perspective was very important too. Everybody else probably would have candy coated it in a way.
Right.
It's just kind of doing it the way he did it. Question, what did you think of one of his movies that I just flat out just didn't get, even though I'm sure there was something to it, but Girl 6?
I think that was one of the ones that I almost brought up earlier, like of when you said, would you have gone to see it if it was, you know, if he didn't make it? I almost listed that one, but I was like, I don't know how memorable it was for me. You know what I mean? I just know she was a phone sex operator and, you know, she met someone and tried to get out of it. You know what I mean? It just was like, I remember being in the theater watching it and being like, it's just like
when the phone falls from the sky.
Yeah, like when not when is this going to be over, but just like I just didn't really have a connection to it. You know what I mean? It was just, I think I tried to look at it from a perspective of like filmmaking. You know what I mean? Like, you know, like all the different kind of nuances from that. But I think I had stopped paying attention to the actual plot of that because it just was like, it just wasn't really relatable to me.
Me either. But, you know, like I said, I like the actress and I like Prince. And like I said, I just, I don't know. I don't know. I guess her getting lost into different identities and just kind of, I don't know. But it was just one of the ones that just never really sat right with me for whatever reason. I remember he directed this Huey P. Newton play with the guy who played the character in Do the Right Thing. So I like the stuff he directs, like his stage play. I like that a lot. So I don't know. Like I said, he got so much stuff. It just depends on the vibe I'm in. but he has so many great movies and he kind of goes everywhere. And I like that he has something to say about stuff and he doesn't pigeonhole himself. It's just unfortunate that he has to always fight for funding and stuff like that. But maybe he don't know it's going to be his last one, so he gives it his all. I don't know. Did you see Chirac?
I did.
What'd you think of that?
Yeah. I just remember the women in the gym being on strike and was like, okay.
Yeah. So.
Interesting.
Yeah, so. but he doesn't. I try at least once, but not that blood Jesus one. He could keep that. But anyway, yeah. So this is my conversation with Sebrenia, catching up and talking about Spike Lee. Until next time, peace.
See you later. Peace.
Hey, this is Jay. If you enjoyed my conversation with Sebrenia, you can also check out our conversation we had about Will Smith and also the movie Alice. Thanks for listening. Till next time, peace.